A Bitcoin ETF, it just got a little more likely. I know we've been talking about this for years now, but folks, really it did get a little more likely. And that's because the Bitcoin ETF was approved in Canada, not in the United States, in Canada. But that may mean an awful lot for what's happening here. What does this do for the prospects of a Bitcoin ETF in the United States? Let's talk to the people who might know the answer to that. First, Som Saif is the CEO of Purpose Investments. He's the fellow who got approval for that Bitcoin ETF over in Canada. Christian Magoon runs the Amplify Transformational Data ETF. That's BLOK. They specialize in blockchain investing. He knows an awful lot about this subject. And Andrew McCorman from Wallach Beth Capital. He's our all-round expert on ETFs and on ETF trading. Gentlemen, thanks very much. So let me start with you. I understand your ETF is going to be trading tomorrow under the symbol BTCC in Canada. Is that correct? And would this be accessible somehow to U.S. investors?
Yes, Bob. It's first off, thanks for having me on. And look, we're really excited about this. It's going to start trading tomorrow. First in the world that will be physically backed. Basically a dollar invested will be backed by $1 of real Bitcoin in our cold wallets. And this is a traded security. So like any traded security, it's available for anyone to buy anywhere. It is a registered fund for Canadian investors specifically. But I'm sure we'll see institutional demand and interest around this from a global investor base.
So if I'm sitting in the United States, just hold my hand a little bit, and I have a Schwab account or whatever, e-broker account, would I be able to access that and buy it if I wanted to?
Well, I think it really comes down to whether your brokerage firm will allow you to buy, securities that are not listed in the U.S. exchanges. So anything that's traded on a Toronto Stock Exchange or, in many cases, some of the international exchanges. And I think if that is the case, then, you'd be able to trade this security just like any other. And we hope that, investors are able to achieve that. But ultimately, it comes down to the brokerage firm that they work with.
Yeah. Let me ask you what turned around the Canadian regulators. I mean, what argument did you make? Why did they approve a Bitcoin ETF this time around? I know there were several issues with them, just like there were several issues with the SEC here in the United States. Should investors have access to this investment? Is it appropriate for them? Was one issue. Could it trade officially? And then there was that whole custody question they still have in the U.S. Could it be done in a regulated manner? Were those issues addressed? Were you able to cure them? What did you tell them to convince them to approve it?
Well, first and foremost, I think, if you go back to sort of 2017, 2018, when the first batch of Bitcoin filings, ETF filings came out, a large part of the struggle is the industry accepting of this as an asset class? And I think, the regulators were really struggling with that question for a lot of the this was still an early stage asset, that hadn't been fully proven out, very retail oriented, was institutional interest in there. But the bigger real point was the infrastructure there. And I think, frankly, as I think I've told you, I think that the infrastructure wasn't there in 2017. And I think if they had gone about it and improved these products back then, it wouldn't have worked out well, I think. But a lot has changed in the last 3+ years around the plumbing. When you talk about custodial elements, I mean, today you have real institutional quality and regulated custodians. You have futures market that just wasn't really there a number of years ago, but today is now a heavily traded and very liquid market from a market maker's perspective and a liquidity perspective. There's the ability for market makers to now, directly trade in the Bitcoin market as opposed to only using the futures market. So there's so much plumbing that has been built into this space in the last number of years. And I think that from a regulatory perspective, you were able to address, and we were able to address with Canadian regulators, those key hurdles, those key questions over the last couple of months. And then the real question of, was there acceptance? And I think that has, for the most part, changed. I think people have recognized that Bitcoin is a real asset. It's a real security that people, should have access to. And frankly, they're going to go and have access to it regardless if it's in a regulated way or a non-regulated way, and might as well, in my opinion, get it in a regulated way. And I think that's what the Canadian regulators saw.
And can you describe the mechanics of this? How does this operate? Are you going to physically go out and buy Bitcoin and hold it yourself directly? Can you do creations? Can you do in-kind creations? Those kinds of things. How does this work mechanically?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And look, as I said, there's a fair amount of work that had to go into getting this to where it is. I'm just even, being the first to be able to do so. So first and foremost is these are going to be what I'd say backed by real Bitcoin. So there's no futures, there's no notes or anything like that. So we are actually owning every dollar invested in the ETF will be backed by a dollar of Bitcoin in our cold wallets. The principle there is cold wallet. So as you know, in the digital asset base, I really have to kind of start thinking about the custody in a different way, because you're dealing with a security that is, kind of movable in different ways. So we use a cold wallet custody solution with Gemini. That's actually the unique element of what we've done. So we don't have to actually store a large part of any part of our Bitcoin in hot wallets, which is where you have the risk of, potential hacking or risk of, it not being secure for you. And then the principle there was then how do you get the fluidity for daily activity, daily trading, buying and selling within the security. So we've worked with our market makers, with our custodian, and with our, I'll call it broker dealers, trading agents, ensuring the ability to execute this. And what doesn't get lost on this, Bob, is that we're dealing with a digital asset that effectively settles instantaneously. And then, of course, the regular ETF and the market, security market, trades in a T+1 or T+3 settlement. And managing those gaps is a really important part of this. And some of the stuff that our team has really built into this.